Welcome to the AT Construction Podcast. And today we have with us Jeff Dungan, who's an architect, author, and girl dad, and he does some amazing architecture. So let's talk about the girl dad. How many girls do you have?
So I have three daughters. They're 28, 20, and 18. They're wonderful, and they're all, I've ticked off one college education, and I'm halfway through another one and one wedding. So I still got a little work left to go.
So in other words, you still have a lot of work, a lot of career left to get through that.
I still got some tread left on the tires. I hope I gotta make it through this.
Well, I feel that, I'm not at your stage yet. So I have 5 girls, Jeff. So
gosh.
Yeah, I'm a little bit behind you, but my oldest is a senior in high school. She's 17. So, college is upcoming, weddings, all that will be upcoming. So I got a lot of tread left still.
Yeah, no kidding. So your oldest is about the same stage in life as my youngest. So
yep.
I just got a little head start on you. But
so without
it looks like it too. You see all the gray hair. See, you don't have the gray hair.
Well, one thing I'll say is, probably not for this podcast, but I may have to get you on speed dial later for some advice, as we get through this later. So
yeah, right. Like I know what I'm doing, right?
Well, I know you definitely know architecture, that's for sure, and that's really why I brought you on today. Outside of the parental advice, but Jeff, you're someone I follow for a while now. You have some amazing designs. You've worked all throughout the country. Everywhere essentially. You're author of Timeless Design, and I wanted to pick your brain on that a little bit about what is timeless design, because that's something we hear thrown around from people in the industry, clients, and so what does that mean to you? And I know you have a book on that as well.
Yeah, I think it's there's some things that I think tend to make houses or buildings stand what we call the test of time. There's a lot to it probably, but I think some of the key parts are probably have to do with materials and using materials that are more tried and true. Those are kind of some basic blocking and tackling things. Especially in America where we've got like a fake version of everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think if there's anything we probably shouldn't be faking, it might be stone. So just sticking with things that are real and using things that have been around for centuries is a great step in the right direction. I think another thing that's important is just proportions, just good proportions. Somebody told me one time that proportions are free. I found out later that they're actually really expensive.
Yes, they are expensive.
but there are a certain amount of proportions that really are free. We're going to put a window in there. We might as well really study the proportions of that, the panes and the lights and the transoms and all of those things. And those kind of things are actually sort of universally known, and you can study things like the golden section and the rules of thirds and things, proportioning systems that have been around for forever, and it's math. It's fairly universally agreed upon. So I think those kinds of things also tend to make things that just look good, and if the proportions are good, you're more than halfway there. And then if you're using really good materials, then you can kind of tick that box. And I really try to stay away from a whole lot of conversations, at least as it is in regards to timelessness of style. I think there's some great Tudor buildings, and there's some Tudor buildings that don't look so great. And, so it's not necessarily that you have to be constrained, or at least I don't feel so constrained by matters of style. I think style is a little bit of a dicey thing to try to bring into that conversation, although people frequently do.
So it's interesting. We're winding this a little bit, and you made a comment about the golden section and the rule of thirds, and I want to pick your brain about that. What is that for those listening that have never heard that term, golden section? What is that?
So the golden section is just a mathematical, combination of that helps us understand proportions better. It absolutely comes from a natural progression. It has to do with pi, 22 sevenths and things that are infinite. And you can just Google it. I mean, but it forms the shape of a nautilus shell, and it's exactly kind of in that kind of pattern. So there's many other things besides the nautilus shell that also the golden section will refer to, but it basically will end up, if you really want to kind of cut it down to something that's pretty easy to say, you end up with, if let's say you're doing a rectangle, let's just say, give an example and say you're going to make a window. Well, the golden section is going to give you whatever the short side of that rectangle is. It's going to give you a long side that's about 1.618 times bigger than the small side. So let's say you were doing something that was 10 inches wide, then you'd be 16 and an eighth or a quarter tall. Okay, and it's not, you can still screw it up, but that'll give you a good rectangle that just about anybody would look at that and say, yeah, that's an attractive rectangle, compared to a rectangle that's a little taller or a little bit wider. It gets a little squatty. So these are rules, and rules are fun to break, and I break them all the time. But when you get into things like see those windows there in my study here. Those panes are about 7 inches wide and about 11 inches tall. And I just found that to be, a good looking proportion that just seemed to work. And so I started, if you take that proportioning, that diagonal of a 7 to 11, and you extrapolate that thing out and it goes to 8 inches, then it's like 12, or, once you get that line, you've got it, so it doesn't really matter. Well, I don't want a 7-inch wide pane. Fine. Make the pane however wide you want to, but then as long as it catches that line that is about 1.618, you're going to have a pretty good looking proportion.
That's interesting, Jeff. So this is really the mathematical side, that really that same, you think of a triangle, a lot of us who are in geometry, right? And so as, sine, cosine, tangent, and all the fun things we used to do. But the reality is, even proportionally, is that, the width and height gets bigger, of that pane, if you will. You're still trying to keep that same proportion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And again, these are what I call just general rules of thumb. It doesn't mean that, everything that you do has to follow that. But if you'll follow these kind of things and use these kind of things as a general guideline, more often than not, your stuff's going to look pretty good to just about anybody. And the rule of thirds is another one. I mean, basically, and I came to architecture through art, so a lot of my thinking is still rooted in art, and odd numbers tend to be pleasing to the eye, so if I'm doing windows, if I'm doing them in a group, then I'm usually a lot of times going to have 3 windows, not 2, in that same opening. Not to say that we don't do plenty of openings that have 2 windows, and it's totally fine. But that's another one. And then, if you're talking about now I'm going to kind of shift, and because I bend all these things a little bit. So everything I'm saying, like, people could pick it apart. It's fine. I'm not trying to be perfect in what I'm saying. But another way you can understand the rule of thirds is from a camera perspective. And you think about the frame, and you have 3/3 vertically, and you have 3/3 horizontally, and it's just we just know that if you can understand how to manipulate those thirds and how you frame something when you're taking a photograph, that photograph's going to be more pleasing, given using that rule of thirds. So that's just another proportioning system, another way of dividing things up. And this is all, pretty basic. It's mathematically based. So it's easy to remember and fairly easy to understand.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Jeff, because as you break that down, though, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. A lot of us, I would say, the lay person or people that aren't familiar, that don't have your technical ability, right, Jeff, is they're looking at a house, maybe they're scrolling through Pinterest or Instagram and they love it and they don't know why, right? They don't understand, as you mentioned, there's 3 windows, so proportionally how that lays out. And for us, you mentioned this early on too. You said, proportions are not free, right? It's, proportions actually cost a lot to build. So how do you set that expectation with the client? And the reason I ask is because when I meet with clients, especially at that discovery point, right in the beginning of the process, is we're sitting down and they're showing me images in their house, and I'm trying to walk them through why that house is more expensive than this other one, right? And part of that is, in Arizona at least, we have HOAs we build in, and some HOAs are really strict as far as that proportion, right? You can't have a linear length of a certain amount of just flat wall, right? You have to have it tiered and staggered, and there has to be window depths, right? That maybe 6-inch depth on the windowsill. And so these proportions and thirds, as you mentioned, that golden section are really key, because that's what's really dressing up the curb appeal of the house. And so the customer doesn't realize that does add cost, right? It adds cost to exterior finishes or the window package or the framing budget, right? The lumber, having a 2x8 exterior wall as opposed to maybe something else because of what the HOA is dictating. So how do you communicate that with the client, set an expectation so they understand when they come in, Jeff, we want what we want, but we have to take your expertise too to walk us through this?
Well, I mean, I basically tell everybody the same thing. I got way more cool ideas than you got money. So let's just get that out there on the table. And then I follow that up with, if I ever save you any money, I didn't mean to. So I like to just set the expectation there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make you a place that's going to, in as much as an architecture can do, as much as to my ability I can, I want to make a place that's going to basically change your life. And to me, you can't put a price on that. So let's just talk about things that are infinite and things that are, way more meaningful than what something costs. Yeah, there's a cost to it. And I understand, there's a budget, and we have to have, all kidding aside, we do have to have a relationship to how much somebody is wanting to invest in a particular project. I call that their threshold of pain. And so what I want to try to understand is, where's your threshold of pain? And I want to get right up close to it, but not too far beyond it. And that's just being a good steward with other people's money. And we do, all kidding aside, really take that very seriously. But I think at this point, I'll just be honest, I've been really fortunate, and we get to do a lot of cool projects all over the world. And I think the expectation, as you call it, is already kind of been set. And so I don't work anymore very, very often, or get into situations where the level of quality that I'm trying to create for them is far beyond the level of quality that they expect and that they want. And they understand that there's a cost to it that's going to be maybe higher than the average home.
Well, I have to say, Jeff, you caught me off guard because of all my years of doing this podcast and then speaking to others. When you made the comment early on about if I saved you money, I didn't mean to. I did laugh pretty hard because that's something that I wasn't expecting. And so how do customers take that when you say that?
They know that I'm kidding, but the humor makes the medicine go down a little bit better, right? Like, like I said, there is a budget, there is kind of a number, there is a threshold of pain, but at the same time, I'm not going to start out, I'm not weighing every decision that I'm making for them based on how much it costs. And, I guess that it is what it is, but I just think there's something way more important that hangs in the balance. And that thing that hangs in the balance is their experience and living inside this, home, this structure that we're creating for them, and how they experience life so differently because of the way the light comes into it, because of the way it flows in a way that's in tune with their life. So this is like the difference in, I never will forget the first jacket I ever had made for me. And when they got the jacket and I put it on, it just went flop. And it fit every little contour, on my torso. And I'd never experienced that. And once you experience that, it's like, it's just very difficult to ever want to go back to something that's less fitting to your particular life. Now I'm talking about the house, not a jacket, but
it's a great analogy. I mean, to that point, Jeff, as you talk about, hey, getting fitted for, your first blazer, your first jacket, and how that changed. And that's perspective for your client too, that you've worked hard and, you're well-versed, you're knowledgeable, you're creative. I mean, it shows in your work and everything you've done in your career. And so people come to you for that value. And, home today means so much different than it did in years past. And people, as you mentioned, you're directing them to be inspired, to be motivated when they see their home, to feel at peace, feel happy. I mean, these, it's a short life. And so for those that have worked hard and understand your value and can achieve that, I mean, it's a great thing.
Amen. Right. I mean, my goal is to transform your life. Like, I want your life to be different than it was before you lived inside that thing that we designed, and because of the way we were able to bring the light in, and we were able to create the views, and we're able to make the flow by listening to how you want to live. If you entertain a lot, or if you never entertain, if you love to cook or you never cook, all of those things. If you're a more formal person, if you're a more, loquacious type, all those things. We're weighing all those things, and we're putting all those things so that this thing fits you in this way that it couldn't fit anybody else that way. Other people may like it, and hopefully they would, but it's not about anybody else. It's about you. And I think when you think of things in those terms, it's like, what's that worth? So it sort of changes. I want to have a conversation, not about the cost of the thing, but the value of it. And, there's an old saying that I love that, there's people that know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. Those people are not my clients. And I understand, it takes all different kinds to make a world, but, if that's, where you are, that, we're probably not going to work real good together.
Well, I think unbeknownst to you, Jeff, as we've been speaking, I mean, you've already inspired me where I'm like, hey, if I'm designing a house, I need to call Jeff, right? Because just this overall passion you have for the industry, for architecture, for design, and as you break that out and communicate that, to just me who's interviewing you, I sit there and think about the right customer that understands. And, a lot of people listen to the podcast. I mean, they're entrepreneurs, they're in design, they're in architecture, they're in construction. And one of the tough things, feedback wise that a lot of them give is, hey, how do you present your value, right? It's really hard to do that. How do you showcase your worth? How do you deliver that to the client? And really, for anyone that wants to know that, just listen to the first 20 minutes here of you speaking, because you've done this in a way where people say, if I want to be inspired, if I want my life to change, and it's, as you mentioned, if the cost of everything, you have the value of nothing, right? You don't understand the value. And that's what you're delivering. And that's why people need to be listening. And this is how you present that.
Yeah. It really is. It makes life so much better, so much more meaningful. And I just, even some of the things that you touched on earlier, about how do you show your worth, or how do you, show your value in life. Of course, I'm at a little bit of a different point in my career. I'm not at the beginning. I hope I'm not at the end of it either, but that's not up to me, right? So but I am at a point where, you know, I've been very fortunate. I've been able to demonstrate through experience and over time with me and my staff an ability to do things at a certain level, and that for a lot of people is meaningful. And those people we call clients. And I'm always looking for more of what I call my people. And you know, when you get on the phone with them in 5 or 10 minutes, you're like, yeah, these are my people. And when I say that, I mean, you know, we value similar things, right? And so there's not a disconnect between what's important to these people and what's important to me and my staff, and how we go about it. And you know, the rest is just a whole lot of details.
Yeah, and really that gets into the ideal client. Like, it's easier for you to vet them because your visions align and the value there. And what's interesting, you know, early on in the conversation, Jeff, you were, when I asked you about timeless design, you made a couple comments, and I don't want this conversation to go down the pros and cons of capitalism, right? Like in America, but you see in other parts of the country where, you know, really thoughtful execution as far as product, right? Tried and true materials, which is the comment you mentioned. You know, you look at in America how at times we can be very wasteful and we're not thinking about, you know, we're heavy consumers. I mean, that's just reality of our culture here in America. And so, you know, for you and I that are working with clients to help them envision, right, as we educate and talk about and have these discussions about whether it's sustainability or net zero or energy efficiency or real stone, as you mentioned, not faux stone, something that's going to last. And really by someone such as yourself, Jeff, that's going to design a beautiful house that has natural finishes, that's well thought out, you know, it's lit well, it has character, right? This isn't something that's, hey, in 20 years, we're going to scrape and then just build something new because it wasn't executed properly.
Exactly right. So another one of those kind of points of, you know, knowing when it's the right fit is when they say, and almost ubiquitously they do, you know, this is the last house I'm going to build, or this is my forever house, or I may build another house, but this is going to be, you know, I'm never selling this house. I'm not trying to flip this house. This will be, my kids will live in this house, or my kids will, if it's a beach house or whatever, my kids will still vacation here, and those kind of things. And I think that is the kind of mental framework that you have to have for you to go on this type of a journey, right? And it's not for everybody. And I want to say that too. You know, I'm not saying that everybody that doesn't think this way is wrong. This is just the way I believe. This is my sort of spiritual journey into architecture and design and life, actually, and how we live it and how we go about it. But I understand and appreciate and respect that everybody doesn't have that same opinion.
Yeah, but it's a great question. I mean, as you're thinking about that vetting, going back to the ideal client, right? You're asking, I mean, just understanding this is their forever home, or this is the forever vacation home, and how that transpires through generations. You know, with all that you've done in your experience, Jeff, I mean, where do you see the future of home? How have you seen that change with COVID through the pandemic? You know, that what people are asking for. What do you see happening now, currently, with your designs and moving forward?
That's a great question. And I think that the answer is going to be long in coming. And we need to get more distance between ourselves and these events to truly, probably fully comprehend what it really is doing to us and has done to our psyches. But having put that caveat in place, I would say it's in some ways it's been not entirely a bad thing because of how people now value their home life and their experience at being home or being in their structure, in their abode, wherever it is. Because they were locked up inside it for, you know, these many months, and they realized that there were so many things I think, about their homes that didn't really fit their life, and it's made, I think, a lot of people really re-examine, what home means to them and how their house needs to relate to their lifestyle, and in a lot of ways that it just didn't. Just one really simple example of this. I think there's a bunch that I'll throw a few out, but this one's just really easy. All of a sudden, everybody wanted a pool. Okay, like, who's busier in the construction industry right now than the pool guy?
Oh, it's so true.
It's exploded. And I was talking to a pool guy, and I swear the cost of pools is like triple. And it's not that they're necessarily taking advantage. It's just a supply and demand thing. And it's crazy. But, all of a sudden people are like, golly, if I'm going to spend this much time at home, honey, we need that pool. We always talked about doing a pool. Because that's just easy. You dig a hole in the backyard, and you build a pool. That's fine. That's kind of low hanging fruit. But I think another one, a little bit more into design and our work is just almost nobody these days doesn't ask for a home office. And the home office, though, at the same time is morphed, and it's not necessarily this big paneled, pecan wood,
library,
fancy thing. It's not that. And you'd think kind of like maybe it would become that, but it's not. They're like, I just need a spot. I just want a little spot with a desk. And some people want it close to their bedroom. Some people want it absolutely on the other side of the house from their bedroom, because they want to separate the work life from trying to rest and that kind of thing. But everybody, and they both want one. The man and the woman want one, and they're usually kind of in different places. But nobody isn't asking for that now. And I think that's probably the easiest, most simple, direct correlation of kind of an example that you could give, along with the swimming pools. But I think, again, the overarching thing that's really happened is everybody is way more aware of, and sometimes painfully so, of how their house doesn't really work for them. And I think that's also caused been at the foot of the reason of why our industry is experiencing such a surgence of work and projects and opportunities.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because in my experience, everything you said is spot on. I look here in the Phoenix market, and being in a warm weather climate, of course, it's going to attract a lot of people. It's a lot of outdoors, golf, things of that nature, where, in COVID lockdown, it gives people a little bit more freedom. But what's interesting is part of the boom here, as you mentioned, when clients reach out, it's very common. I need an office. My spouse needs an office. My kids need an office for homeschool, right? So now it's like, for a long time, we got away from offices. We got away from theaters or like these extravagant backyards. And now it's like, no, we have to if we're locked down. And now it's like, we need a cold plunge. We need a sauna. And it's not just this luxury living, but as you mentioned, hey, I could have a simple office, but I need at least something on my back wall for Zoom calls, right? When I'm on Zoom meetings all the time. But what's interesting is, the clients are they're finding a different value in home, right? A different, it's more romantic in this sense that a lot of them, hey, they slept here and then they went and traveled, but now they're not traveling. This is their home base and this is their sanctuary, and they want it to be nice. And I've seen that with the younger generation. A lot of clients we have too are younger. And even as I network, there's a lot of peers of mine that their kids were, living in an apartment or, some condensed living. And then through the pandemic, as they're locked in and they have a pet, they're like, we don't have space. Before the pandemic, they're like, we don't want to go down this traditional road of a mortgage and have a house. But now actually we want the house. We want the backyard. We want the pool. And so that's what's really changing and creating a lot of the, the bottleneck that we have now, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. And, we're doing a lot of second homes and a lot of people, I think a lot of people want a place to retreat to, or a place to get away to. So like, if and when, these kind of things happen again, they want a place to where they can go and have more wide open spaces, or go to the lake, or go to the mountains, or, go to the beach, whatever their flavor is. But they want that secondary getaway, that space. And then they also want for their home to really tick all the boxes and really meet all their needs. So I think they, and be more self-sufficient. It's almost like its own little, resort, if you will, maybe in some ways. I definitely seen that, and you touched on that as well.
So what's interesting, Jeff, I look at, for someone that's an architect and creator, and you mentioned that you had a background in art, right, which has impacted just your design and your drive. And I think what's interesting about you is, growing up on a farm. So it's not like you grew up in this metropolis city, right, with all this amazing architecture. So you're growing up on a farm, but that does impact your work ethic, because the reality is, it's, people that look from afar think, oh, Jeff's a successful architect, and it just appeared, right? And they don't realize the hours and labor. So how do you feel that, growing up on a farm impacted maybe your desire to be creative, as well as maybe that work ethic that's really helped you build, the reputation you have now?
That's a great point. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question exactly in that way, and you touched on a lot of different aspects of it. The farm I grew up on was, small by farm standards. It was like 100 acres, but it was a real working farm. These weren't gentlemen farmers or people that like to do equestrian things and stuff like that. And not that there's anything wrong with those things, but this farm was basically my grandfather's, and who was a coal miner, and it was literally how we lived. We grew a lot of the stuff that we ate, and we had cows and horses and all those things, and chickens and all that kind of stuff. It was also pretty rural, and so we were out in the what at that time was really out in the woods. Literally and figuratively. And I found that, I believe that just being sort of what I call steeped in nature had really a profound effect on me, because even though, especially remember when I was a young child, before I really had a lot of responsibilities on the farm, I just would go out in the woods with my dog, and I'd go out in the woods all day. And it just, the trees, got in my head, and the proportions of those things. And this may sound weird, but you can just sit there, and if you'll just get still and look up into the trees in the woods, it's just beautiful. And it's magical the way that, especially in the wintertime, how all the branches kind of go together. And I would go hunting and fishing, and so sometimes I was, spending time in the woods that way. But I can't explain all that, but I think somehow there's some kind of proportioning system in all of that got inside me.
Well, if I interrupt you real quick, Jeff, because you're saying something that it made me think of a seminar I'd sat in. What's interesting is you had talked about just nature and this, the natural creation that's out there, as well as the proportions. And you think about just the human body, right? Here's a machine that can operate essentially maybe 100 years, right, with minimal tune-ups if it's properly managed. And you think about like us that create things, like how can you have something that can self-sufficiently run for 100 years? The pumps and the systems, like without maintenance. Like it's amazing what nature does, and for you to have that 100 acres where now you're exploring with your dog, and it really using that to take in, and I can imagine how that's inspired you today.
Yeah, it is, and of course, all you got to do is just go Google John Muir and just read John Muir.
Yeah.
And what does he say? He says, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, get out into nature and it will cleanse your soul. And I find that that's still the case today, that, there's nothing against cities. One of my favorite places in the world is New York City, which is sort of ironic, I guess, for a country boy. But I just love it. There's such an energy there and everything. But I used to think maybe I'd like to live there because it's so fun, and I love to go. And I had an opportunity years ago to spend a few weeks there, and I realized there's no way in hell I could ever live in New York City. It sort of sucks your soul out. But I think that's also why the park is so important to New York. And everybody kind of goes there. It's their little break from the beast of the city. And then where do they go on the weekends? They're not in the city. They're all out, on the island, or, at the beach, or in the mountains, or wherever so I think that just proves the point that there's something about nature that refurbishes our spirits, and I think to many people besides me, very inspiring for whatever you do, but especially I think if you're an artist, you need the inspiration. I've sort of developed a theory in the last few years that inspiration is the fuel for the creative spirit, that in order to really be creative at the highest levels of our capabilities, we have to also be inspired. And so where do we get that inspiration from? There's many sources, but I think nature is supreme.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I wrote this down because you said inspiration is the fuel for a creative spirit. Well, going back to, how we led this off is what's interesting to me, and not just the work ethic side, Jeff, but, a lot of architects, right? And I'm sure at this point in your career, you've been able to do that. As you mentioned, travel and be in New York. But a lot of inspiration comes from traveling, right? Especially if you're in the design. Yeah. I mean, being in Europe, being in Asia, parts where they have sustainable homes that have been there for hundreds and thousands of years, and how that's impacted what you're designing today. Yeah. And growing up on a farm, I don't know many farmers that travel the world on a regular basis, right? Because they're hardworking and you have to be there. It's self-sustainable, as you mentioned. I mean, it's a lot of hard work. So when did that point take place where you were able to travel, where that inspiration came, and what kind of drove you down this path into, I want to be an architect and get into the art side of it?
Man, you ask really good questions. And you're not letting me get away with with sort of brushing aside the work part of farm. So I'll address that one first. I'm Southern, so I can make a short story long, and I can make a long story really long. So I'll try to edit this, but there was this moment where I think I was in the 5th grade, so however old you are then, like maybe 11 or 12 years old. I got out for the summer, and I was ready to go hunting and fishing and play with my friends and do all that kind of stuff. And my dad said, "Son, while you're out for the summer, I want you to bush hog the whole place." And
what does that mean?
So a bush hog is basically that big mower that's on the back of a tractor that you hook up to John Deere in this case. And he said, "I want you to bush hog, the whole place," and which was really exciting for me because I was 11 or 12 years old, and I get to get on the top of this big, gigantic, tractor and drive it. And I knew how to drive the tractor. I'd driven it some, but not that much. So anyway, so I get on the tractor and you'd start. We had different words for all the different sections of the property, and it was all different fences and things, and the cows would be in one pasture or another, and we'd move them around. And so I started in this one pasture, and days go by. Days turn into weeks. I'm in different pastures. I'm going all over the place, and we had quite a bit of topography on our farm. We had an area we called the bottom, and then we had the hill up on top, and there's a lot of other different pastures. Well, I started in the bottom, and I ended up on the hill when I finished up. So, but by now, it'd been 6 weeks, okay, and I'm up at the top of the hill, and I'm looking out. I can see the barn way down in the meadow and everything, and I just kind of sat there and took in my accomplishments. I was so proud of myself. And now I'm going to go play. And now I've got the rest of the summer just to enjoy myself. And I put the John Deere in gear, and I start going back down. And I'm cruising across stuff that I just cut, or maybe I cut a few days and a week before. And it's like tender, and the little cows are out there munching on the tender stuff. And And then I get down to the bottom and I go across the pond, and I'm getting close to put the tractor up in the barn, and the grass is getting taller and taller. And by the time I almost get back to the barn, the grass, the fescue is like, I don't know, it's 24 inches tall. And I'm like, holy crap, like this stuff needs to get cut again. And it was at that moment that I became an incredible student, because I was going to figure out how the hell I was going to get off that farm. And so, the farm actually became my great, as well as my great inspiration, my great motivator to find another career that did not involve, being on the back of a John Deere in 104-degree weather with bugs and just all kinds of things just raining down on you from, because you're basically cutting their ecosystem down, and, there's crickets and things. They're like this long, and yeah,
it's a funny story because we can relate, right? I mean, just the toil of working in the farm and, pulling weeds, and then all of a sudden they're back again. For you, it's, mowing everything down and the fescue's back, and
it's cyclical, right? It's just like nature. It's cyclical, and it never ends. And so, and I tell that story sometimes when I'm giving a speech or something, and inevitably the technology goes blank for 10 minutes or whatever. I always tell that story. Yeah,
it's a great story. So what then transpired? I mean, now here you are, you're like, working in the farm, realize I need an exit strategy. This is not, although I can appreciate it, it's not something I want to do. So what takes that what makes that change where now you know what you love and this is your passion?
So yeah, the part about art and everything. So, I loved to draw when I was a kid, and even up through high school, we were just drawing different kind of cartoons and things. But I just loved to draw, and my mom noticed that, at least in her opinion, I had some artistic ability, which is sort of also a miracle. I don't have any idea like how she would know, or there was so many other things to be concerned about, but she sort of seized upon it, and actually just determined in her mind she was going to get me into some art classes. And I'm a kid, and she finds this artist who actually was quite a watercolorist, and once a week, I guess, he would do a class, maybe twice a month, and his name was Wayne Spradley, and I'll have to Google him. I'm sure he's passed by now, but he was actually really a fabulous watercolorist, and he would teach a class with all these little old wealthy ladies would come and do watercolors, and so she got me in that class, and so here I am, with all these little old ladies, on Thursday a couple of times a month, being taught by a really great watercolorist how to do watercolor. Well, I just fell in love with that. And so I would draw on the watercolor paper, and then I would get the watercolors and paint. And I actually got to be pretty good. I mean, I look at the stuff I did, because my mom, of course, still has these things, all framed, of course. And I couldn't paint like that today to save my life. But I mean, I got real into I would do like Audubon, paintings like birds and stuff. And anyway, and so then I got to high school, and I continued in that. And then, so I was getting ready to, graduate, high school. I guess it was my 11th grade year. And my what do you call it? Your counselor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I went to
guidance counselor.
Yeah. Guidance counselor. I think there was like 55 people maybe in the graduating class, something like that. She said, well, Jeff, you're getting ready for your last year. What are you going to do with your life? And I said, well, I want to play professional football, but I don't think it's going to work out for me. She didn't even laugh. She didn't even get the joke. And she said, well, you're really good at math, and you love to draw, and you're really good at art. Have you ever thought about being an architect? And I said, an architect. I said, is that person you go to when your back is out? And she didn't get that joke either. said, well, you've got to do a paper for your English class on what you're going to do with your life. So it's good as anything. And since you're in your study hall right now, why don't you just check out some books on architecture? And so I went and got in the Dewey Decimal System. And for those of you who remember the Dewey Decimal System.
Oh, yeah.
And I found these books on like Philip Johnson and glass houses and Frank Lloyd Wright. And I was like, what in the world is this crazy stuff? And I checked out 4 or 5 books, and I walked out into the hallway, and I realized that the school that I'd been in at that point for 3 or 4 years was round, and I'd never thought about it. And the hallways were round, and each little classroom was just a pie segment of the circle. And I thought, wow, this is sort of interesting. And so that sort of pointed me in the direction that I'm still pursuing today.
That's amazing. I actually love that story. I didn't anticipate hearing, something to that magnitude. I mean, you had a guidance counselor that actually could see that, could see your test scores, and then here you are, you fall in love with it, and just, your mom with the watercolors and, getting involved in that. And not that this is confession day, but it's funny. I look back and I wish this had more of an impact on my career, but it did make me appreciate culture in this. That's I was the oldest grandchild. And my grandmother was really into like folk dancing, like she's German folk dancing. It's a little embarrassing. Most people don't know this. A couple of my employees do, and they give me a hard time. So when I was younger,
you cut this part out of the whole conversation.
Yeah. So here, I guess we are confessing on the podcast today. But when I was like 7, 8, 9, actually until I was like 12, I mean, to be honest here, she would take me like once a week, and I would go dress in like lederhosen and go dance. We do these Russian dances, Russian gear, and then we go perform Oktoberfest. And I hated it. Like I honestly hated it to this day, but it was sweet of her to take me. And honestly, I had a lot of appreciation for other cultures, and I lived foreign, I lived abroad in Argentina for a couple of years after high school. And so, I feel I had a good impact that way. I mean, it didn't impact my career as a contractor, of course, but for you, I mean, just those experiences, right? Life experiences, like for you, Jeff, as you go through this and then going to college and what was that transition like? I mean, did you end up working for a big architecture firm? Did you start your own firm right away? I mean, how's the business side then?
So let me see. That was quite a few years ago. So I went to the Alabama Polytechnic Institute, which we would know as Auburn University.
Oh, wow.
Today. And I like to say that because it was actually called Auburn then, but I think they changed the name in like 56, and I'm not quite that old. But there was a ton of really amazing people there that I was very fortunate to be around and be with and learn from and be inspired by. Some that you would know would be Ray Booth, who's an interior designer and architect, and he works with McAlpin. And Bobby was one of our professors there at Auburn, and he at that time was practicing in Montgomery, which was maybe a 45-minute drive from Auburn, and so he would come do some studios there, and there was just a ton of really talented people there. Greg Tankersley was there, who's in New York now, and golly, I'll remember some more names, but they were all amazing, and had just had some great professors. That Bill Gwynn was one of my professors that just was a real mentor to me and really taught me how to think. I think a lot in some very different ways. And his wife Mary was transformative, and she was an English professor, and I was forced by her husband to take her English class, and I hated English and hated writing, and I really fell in love with it because of her. And I still love to write to this day, but if it weren't for them, I don't believe that would have probably happened. So that was a fantastic experience. It was in the mid '80s, and that was transformative. And then I came back to Birmingham at the end of the '80s. The economy was not in great shape at all, so it was very difficult to find a job. And But there was some work out there, but not a ton. And I had worked for a very, very small firm here in Birmingham. And so I just came back and went to work for them. I actually still had some of my some classes, just some free elective classes that I needed to take. So it worked out great. I worked during the day, and then I took, metaphysical psychology and sculpture at night. So it was a good transition for me not to just go straight from, the ethereal kind of experiences of college into what the quote unquote real world. I got to sort of have this transition where I still had a foot in both. And I met a man who had graduated from Cornell, who was teaching art and sculpture there. And I really hit it off with him, and came to find out his degree was actually in architecture, but he was an artist, and he became an incredible mentor for me. And for the next 2 years, he would make a class and tell me the number of the class, and I would apply to it. And there was only one student in the class, and it was me. And he and I would I would get credit for it, but we'd build tables, and I'd design things, and he'd give me a grade, and it was pretty cool.
That's amazing.
And then, so I worked there for a couple of years, and then I worked for a really big, at least for here, a good sized firm. There's about 30 people there. Again, great people. So many of those people have gone on to form firms here in Birmingham, and very talented designers and architects. And I worked there for about 7 years, and then, so I've been out of school then for about 10 years. I had my license, and so then me and a friend left and started our own practice, which we were crazy to do. There weren't a whole lot of 34-year-old people that were starting their own firms, but I sometimes wonder if our ambitions weren't greatly exceeding our abilities, but we did it, and it's been a wild ride.
Oh, I can only imagine. I mean, looking back now, especially starting in a recession, and a downturn is always difficult. There's a lot to be learned though, and it gives you some opportunity as well. Looking back, if you were to start your company today with a wealth of knowledge and experience, I mean, what would you have done different, or what would you recommend to maybe a young architect that is starting their own company?
I think that's a fabulous question. You've done this before, I can tell. So I read back before Frank Gehry was really Frank Gehry, that has become, the international rock star that he's become. But when he was working with chain link fencing and doing some of that fun, funky stuff in Santa Monica, I just fell in love with what he was trying to do, which I know sounds probably strange if you look at my work, but I'm kind of a closet modernist. And
interesting.
He was very inspirational to me. And they did a little, I forget the publication, it might have been one of those little fight-in things, but it was a little manuscript, a little thin, skinny book, and it was just a long interview with Frank Gehry. And he said something like, "You'll be more known in 25 years from now for what you said no to than what you said yes to." And I thought, what in the hell does that mean? That just didn't make a lick of sense to me, but it always stood out. And I'm not sure, like probably a lot of things that Frank Gehry might say, exactly what he means, but I think what I've come to believe that means is, if you don't say no to the wrong things, you can't say yes to the right things. And I think that has been a very important guiding principle in what I've tried to do in my career. Is as soon as you can afford to say no to the things that either it's the wrong person, or it's the wrong type of project, or it's not, especially in the beginning, every project you do is potentially taking you down a path. And so when you say yes to that, you're saying yes to not just that might pay your bills or keep your lights on, but that which, people are going to say, oh, he did that, or he was involved with that client or with that project. I just think it's really important not just to look at projects as a thing, but in and of themselves, but as a sort of a journey and a potential path. And so you got to look at that and go, is this the kind of work I want to be doing? Now, if you're starving to death, there's your answer. But as soon as you're not starving to death, pick the kind of work and the kind of people you want to be working with and seek those people out and let your marketing and your direction be always steered towards that. Otherwise, you can end up somewhere that you never really wanted to be. And it's so sad to me to see that. And you do see it from time to time. And, I just feel like it's a waste of a life. And as long as we get to pick and choose what life we're going to live, which at least so far in this country we still can, I think it's important to choose wisely.
Yeah, it's extremely sound advice. I mean, I'll say, Jeff, just thinking of that, and that's not so much theoretical, but I mean, as you think about that application, not just the happiness side, not just where you want to kind of drive your career and where you want to be, but as you think about marketing strategies too, as a company, right? If you're marketing yourself, for me, an example, like if I want to build custom homes and I'm marketing a remodel or a kitchen, like that's what I'm going to be known for. And so you have to be able to pursue projects. This is where the avenue you want to go down. And the reality is design, architecture, construction. I mean, there's some glamorous sides of it, that we post on social media, but the reality is that final picture that you showcase, Jeff, the pain, the years, just the struggle. So true. It is such a tough industry. For me as a builder, it's tough to execute and get the labor and, get the material, especially now. And, there's so many challenges that you and I deal with on a daily basis that the normal person doesn't see. And that's why, even more so that passion and what you want to go after, you have to, because it's a tough road.
It really is. I always, not always, but you've reminded me of a feeling I get a lot. The stuff that, we post on the Instagram, and it's like, holy shit, like it's so deceptive and not intentionally so, but there's so many people that were involved in making that picture happen. And I guess if anything ever bothers me, it's that, I kind of feel like the quarterback on the Super Bowl team. You get way more credit than you deserve.
Yeah.
It comes with the territory, I guess. But at the same time, just always remembering that, all the hands that touched the masonry and the tile and the wood flooring and the clients that put up, exorbitant amounts of money to fund the thing, and then all the people, all the creative people that also did their part. And it sometimes seems a little like I don't know how to explain all that in a picture on Instagram, but it's very true.
Well, it's impossible to go through all that, and the big thank you list, right? You'll be at the Oscars standing there for 18 minutes, right? Talking about it when you have to think. But the reality is, Jeff, I mean,
the music starts playing, they got to get you off the stage.
They're getting you off the stage quickly. But, in reality, Jeff, I mean, I honestly could sit here and talk to you all day. I had a whole list of things to ask you, and I want to be sensitive to your time. And I mean, you spark my interest in so many ways, and you have this amazing way to deliver that. And that's why, just so you know, there were so many that reached out to me and said, "Brad, you need to get Jeff on. Like, he's just a rock star." And
that's great. And I appreciate it.
Yeah. And I look forward to the day we're going to be working together. So for those listening though, like, what's upcoming and exciting for you?
Oh my goodness. Man, I'm so excited about, a bunch of projects that we're doing. Golly, I don't really know where to start. One thing that's exciting, to me is, getting to work in different places that have what I call different building traditions. Just for instance, it's a very different experience to do a building on the side of a hill in Costa Rica, as opposed to somebody wants to talk to me about my insurance on my car. I just know it. It's one of those numbers.
Yeah.
You don't know who that is. and how you build, basically kind of almost like in a jungle, and then fly up to Canada, and we're finishing up this teeny little house on the coast of Nova Scotia, and we had to bury the footings 8 feet deep to get out of to be below the frost line. And it's
incredible.
The difference in that conversation from Canada, Costa Rica, or another sea place, California, where they really do some crazy stuff, is just so thrilling. And the learning experience going through that, and how the game changes. I mean, I'm still trying to accomplish the same things, right? Like, I want to create an amazing emotional experience, right? Okay, that didn't change. But how you go about it, given the environment, you know what I mean? And the context. Both of those projects are on, large bodies of water, the Atlantic Ocean, or I don't even know. I think the Costa Rican one is on the Pacific, but those are still two very different environments to build in. And to me, that has been such a rush, and learning to speak different languages of architecture. That just makes it I get bored. I just get bored so easy. Like, I don't want to do the same thing again. I see these people that they've got their thing. This is their shtick, and they're great at it, but they're just going to do that. That's what they do. And people always say, well, I can always pick one of your houses out, which kind of pisses me off, because I'm trying to be different. It's like, I think I'm fooling people, but I'm really not. But I'm still getting to speak and work in these different languages of architecture and these different dialects. And for me, that is that really is exciting, and keeps me motivated. And I just think, like, you're either evolving or you're not. You're either getting better or you're not. Like, you're either challenging yourself or you're not. And I just life's like you said before. Life's too short to me to not continue to try to grow and continue to learn. And so that's been very exciting for me lately.
Well, I think just that closing advice, right? If you're not evolving, you're not. And the reality is going back to your farm experience, right? I mean, if you're not evolving, there's so much that we have to learn. And with, pandemic and other things, we have to evolve as a company, as a business, and as people. I mean, that's just reality with times that change around us. So for those listening as well, where can our listeners find you, Jeff?
Where can they find me?
Yeah. Social media handles, website, your fun projects coming up.
Instagram is always a good one these days. I tell people it's like a tracking device that's been attached to my ankle. Everybody's like, "Oh, I saw you were here. I saw you were there." So you can always know where we are. My handle is Jeffrey Dungan, JEFFREY DUNGAN on Instagram. That's probably the best way. I don't tweet.
Yeah.
Not there's anything wrong with that. I haven't really gotten into that. I don't really do much on Facebook, although I think when I post something on Instagram, it goes to Facebook because anyway.
Yeah, because they own each other.
That's about the extent of it. You can Google us and see some of our work on our website and some of the magazines and things we've been in, and there's a map of our work on there too. Some places that we've been fortunate enough to practice.
Well, and Jeff, and I'll say also, just in closing, I mean, they can go on Instagram, and there's a link to your book too on Amazon that they could purchase. But Jeff, I just want to thank you. You've been an amazing guest, shared some very insightful information with all of us. So thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking to you too. You had great questions, and you didn't ask some of the questions that sometimes people ask that I just hate. Like, what's a trend that you see, It's like, oh my God, if they ask me that one more time, I'm going to puke, So thanks for not asking the bad questions.
Well, you got it. Thanks, Jeff.
All right. Take care.